Welcome to EPG Pathshala. In the last module, I have discussed about join, how we can join more than one table and write query, and we also learn about how to define constraint in table. Constraint can be defined at table level or column level. Now, I continue SQL in MySQL. In today's module, I would like to discuss about aggregate functions, group by and having clause, and how to write subquery. These all are a very important aspect of SQL, because when you have table and you want to retrieve some particular types of data, you can use aggregate function, group by and having, and subquery. Let us start with aggregate function. So, function can be classified in two categories. One is known as a scalar function, another one is known as a aggregate function. Scalar functions are functions which operate on single value and returns a single value, while aggregate functions operate on a set of values and return a single summary value. Aggregate function are also known as a column functions, and a select statement which use one or more aggregate function is known as a summary query. There are many aggregate functions, but the most common are average, sum, mean, max and count. If we see the syntax of them, then this is the general syntax for each of these functions. These are very similar. The first one, for average, you have to write AVG, and optional you can provide all or distinct. So, it provide either all value or distinct value, and then you provide expression in the parenthesis. So, it returns the average of all null not null values in expression. Same way, sum functions returns the total of all non null values in the expression. Mean will provide minimum value and max will provide maximum value. Count all, it will return the number of non null value is an expression which includes all the non null value, but if you write count star, so it will be return rows selected by the query which include not null value as well. Aggregate function in when you provide expression. So, if you use average and sum function, so expression must result in a numeric value, but for mean, max and count function, it can be a numeric, string or date value. By default, all values included in the calculation regardless of whether they are duplicated or not, but if you use distinct keyword, only distinct value will be displayed. Count star includes null values also, and if you write count and particular column, so it will be give you count of that column with not null values. Let us understand by example. So, I start my WAMP server, I will open PHP MyAdmin. So, as usual in PHP MyAdmin, we have created AP database which having all this table, and I move to SQL here and let me write a very simple query. Let us little bit zoom it. Say for example, there is a invoices table, and invoices table we have total 10 invoices. So, let me write SQL simple statement to give demonstration of aggregate function. I can write select count into bracket invoice ID means IID, and I would like to write as a total invoices from table invoices, right. So, I just write a simple query which use aggregate function count IID as total invoices from invoices. I just copy paste it. So, next time I can use by modifying that the same function. Now, I click on go button. So, it will total there are 10 counts will be there. So, it will display 10. In the similar way, if you want to write, say for example, I would like to write what will be the, I can write sum of all the invoice total. So, I write sum I total and I rename this column as a total invoices, or I can say invoices total, because how many invoices are there that I can write it here, right. If I just save and go it, so it will be display total invoices. That means, in invoices table this all are invoices total. So, total of all this value is displayed here. If you like to find out about average, you can also write about average also, like say for example, here I write select count invoice total, as is not necessary, and I can write sum of invoice total, then I can write average of invoice total, and minimum and maximum value also I can find out for invoice total from table name invoices. Here I do not provide column aliases. So, it will be displayed that way, that there are total 10 invoices, sum of this one is this, average for this one is this, minimum value is this and maximum is this. You can check it from your I total column, minimum is 15.50, maximum is 3813.33. So, that way you can use all this aggregate functions. You can use for if there are character values, like say for example, if I type let me write here SQL query for min and max, I can write select say for example minimum I want to find for vendor name. So, I can write v name, and what are the maximum name means alphabetically descending order from table vendors. So, I type select min v name comma max v name from vendors, and if I click on go button, so it will be say minimum name is BSNL, maximum is Vimal Enterprise. If you look at the here our vendors table, you can get the idea. Look at here, this is just our vendors table. So, all these are v name value. So, minimum is B is capital and it shorting and that way, and last one is V. So, this is all about aggregate function. Of course, you can use some more aggregate functions also. Let us say for example, here I show you few demonstration of that. Say for example, you can write, I just copy and paste that code to give idea. Select count star as a number of invoices and sum of 3 column invoice total minus payment total minus credit total as total you from invoices, and where that condition. So, it will display total number of invoices are 8 and total due is 0. Same way you can write many functions here, write count star as after that particular date, and average you can find out this is maximum minimum total, or on particular date, like say for example, this will demonstrate that on particular date what will be the after particular date 13th April 2011 as per our record, what is the maximum and minimum invoice value. So, it will show after date number of invoices are this much, highest is this and lowest is this value. So, these all are example of it, and you can use with distinct keyword also, like say for example, here I use distinct vendor ID. So, if more than one vendor ID will be applied there, let me just show you. Here I write count distinct vendor ID as number of vendors, number of invoices, right, IID here for invoices, and invoice total from IDate. So, if I click it, it will display number of vendors are 8 and number of invoices are 10. So, this is all about aggregate functions. Now, there are two more clauses that you can apply with select statement. This is group by and having. Of course, not necessary, you both have to use depending on your requirement, you can apply group by as well as having. So, this is the what is the actually general syntax for select statement, because earlier we just when we take a single table, we write select column list from table name where and order by, but when you use group by and having, your syntax will be select column list from table name where condition, then you have to write group by and group by list, then having and search condition, order by order list and limit. And again keep in mind these all are optional, where, group by, having, order, but if you want to use it, then order must be this you have to follow. That means, select star from where, and then you can directly write order by, in case if you know group by and having. If you are using group by and having, so the order of where and having and group by cannot change. That means, you cannot write select star from table, group by this, where this, and having this, right. First you write where, then group by, and then having. So, group by clause is used to group the rows of a result set based on a column. It can be one or more than one column. If there are more than one column, then comma is used to separate it. Aggregate function can include in select statement, then aggregate is calculated for each group specified in the group by clause. And if two or more columns expression are included in a group by clause, then it form a hierarchy where each column or expression is subordinate to the previous one. And a select statement include group by clause, then select clause can include the column used for grouping, aggregate function, and expression which result in a constant value. Let us take one example of group by. Say for example, I move to SQL statement and look at here, there are vendors, and in vendors, vendor city are different, Ahmedabad, Baroda, Rajkot, etc. So, let me write a very simple select query. I just write select, let me write v city, comma, count v city, and I give column title as a count for city. I have to type here as from table vendors. Now, look at here, if I not use group by, then what will actually happens? I just type as it is, and it will display that there is a no any rows will be only one value, because Ahmedabad will the first city, but total cities are 9. But now, if I use group by here, writing the same query, but I want to group by on vendor city, right. So, it will show me group by of that. Look at here, there are 4 records for vendor in Ahmedabad, 1 in Anand, 2 in Bombay, 1 in Rajkot, 1 in Baroda. If you look at vendor table here, I just show you, this is our vendor tables, and in vendor tables, vendor city is Ahmedabad 1, 2, 3, 4 records, Bombay will be 1 and 2, Rajkot is 1, Anand is 1, Vadodara is 1. So, that will be your group by, because it will be group on V city, vendor city, and then it will be count for each of this city. This is group by. Yeah, there are many example you can perform with group by. Let me show you one or two example for that one. Say for example, for invoice you can also write that type of query, that how many invoices are there. I just show you that I select vendor ID and count from invoices group by vendor ID. So, each vendor has a how many invoices depending on relationship setup. Say vendor ID 4 has a 2 invoice and 7 has a 2 invoice, that you can check on invoices table. This is vendor table. If you look at invoices table, so in invoices table we provide vendor ID. So, there are 4 is here and here, 7 is here and there, and all others are 1 invoices. In the similar way, you can also summary about number of invoices and average invoice amount for vendor. Say for example, if you just code it V state, V city and count invoice quantity and average from invoices, and then you join and then group by city and state wise. So, it will display state is this, city is this, quantity is this, and their average is this for this city. But just you have to keep remember that you have to include all the column which is not provided with aggregate function, like with round you provide I total and count star is okay, but then you have to write group by and V stat and V city, then only it will provide the correct result. Otherwise, it will be, it can show you, but it may generate error also, because how it can be grouped by that. Let us say for example, if I type here with only V state not city. So, it either generate error or may not give meaningful result, right, because it will display only then Ahmedabad and Bombay 7 and 3, because if you provide here group by with V state and city both, then only it will be become meaningful, because each city and value of that one, because it will be count Ahmedabad as a value of this one. So, just keep in mind that about group by clause. Next we can move to that in group by default group by clause column in ascending order. To show the same in descending order, code describe keyword after the column name in the group by clause. Let us say for example, I take the same example that we have take earlier. So, you can write group by V city in let us say descending order, right. So, it is in display result in first it will be start from V, R, A and A. I can also group by for state also, as we like do with order by clause. For descending you have to use keyword DESC. Now, when you apply group by and now you want to filter it once it is group, then you can use having clause. So, having clause is apply after group by. Having clause is help to search a condition for a group on aggregate function. MySQL applies this condition after it group by row. For example, let me show example of having. Let me just copy and paste that code to give idea about having. I can say select vendor city, count city and average of invoice total from table vendors V, invoices I, where vendors dot vid is I, invoices dot vid and then group by, and after that grouping we would like to filter that only invoice total whose average is greater than 500. So, I apply having here and click on go button, it will display these two records. Ahmedabad and Rajkot average total is greater than 500. In the similar way, you can also write a query like calculate the average amount by particular vendor also. Say for example, VID round average invoice from invoices group by VID and having average total greater than 100. And I can order by on that column aliases as well in descending order. So, as per number of records available to me, it will display that vendor ID is this and their average invoice amount is this. And you can query group to clause with 2 or more invoices also. So, you can use their count function also. Let me just demonstrate the code. I write select vendor state means V state, V city and count star as invoice quantity and round to round the value of average invoice total up to 2 decimal point, it will be rounded. This is nested function, function average and it is nested with round, and then group by this V state and city, but only display that there at least count star means invoice quantity is greater than or equal to 2. So, it will display this 3 city only Ahmedabad, Rajkot and Bombay. So, this is having statement you can use. You can use compound search condition and can be coded using the and or operation, and if search condition include aggregate function, it must be coded in having clause. Otherwise, it can be coded in having clause or where clause. Just take example for this one. Say for example, you can write summary query with that one, like here I code a query which will display invoice date and on that invoice quantity count and sum of invoice total from invoices, and we group by date and where date between this two. So, having date and count greater than 1 and sum of invoice total greater than 200. So, these are the condition which we ending, and if we apply it. So, I get only one row result set, 3 quantity with invoice sum is 200. If I change some parameter, the value can be different depending on the result. In the similar way, I can write that query also. Let us say here I write invoice date, count invoice quantity, sum, and I date between this two date, group by I date, count greater than 1 and sum I total greater than 200. So, again I think it will be the same thing, because there are greater than 200 I have written. If I written greater than 100, so if any value which is greater than 100, that will be also counted, or let me write greater than 50. Let me first try with 100 to give idea. So, I move to SQL, just type the code, and this is same, because whether it is greater than 100 or 200, right. So, no value between 100 and 200, that is why it shown that result. You can compare between where and having, because where you are using and where you should use having. So, where is generally used after your from clause and it will be applied to that, while having is apply after you grouping that particular query. And you can see that where clause can refer to any column in the base table, though it is included in select or not, but having clause only refer to column which is included in the select clause only. Where clause cannot contain any aggregate function, while having clause can contain aggregate function. Let us take one example of this one. Say for example, here I open the code for compare with group by and having. So, first I write that query using having. I just show you the query. Select vendor name means V name, count star as invoice quantity, round invoice total and average of 2 decimal point from vendors and invoices, and then group by vendor name, and then having average invoice total greater than 200. So, this is about we are using having after group by. If I run that query, it will display this value. Now, let me open one more tab here to give idea about how you can apply with where. So, for where, the same query you can write as a in where condition. Here you type select V name, count star as invoice quantity, round average invoice total up to 2 decimal point, or sorry, rounded up to 2 decimal point from vendors V, invoices I, and invoice total greater than 200. So, here condition is in the where clause, where earlier it was in the having average we are taking. So, now if you run that code, so it will display these 3 records. Here it will display 2, 2 and 1. Look at the invoice quantity 2, 2 and 1, BSNL, Arcan, post office. Here it will be 1, 1, and average and all these are different, because in where it will be applied to before group by, while in having it will be applied after group by. Next, move to the sub query. So, you can write sub query, it is query inside a query, like you can use join, you can also write sub query to retrieve the record from your select statement. In sub query, it is must enclose in parenthesis, and sub query can return a single value, a result set which has a single column, or result set has multiple column. Sub query can be coded anywhere in a single value, a result set that has a single column, or result set has multiple column. Sub query has the same syntax as standard select statement, and sub query can be nested with other queries. Sub query where you can put, so you can write in a where clause in a search condition, having clause in a search condition, from clause of a table, and select clause as a column specification. Sub query cannot include an order by clause, because it is a sub query. Let us take very simple example of sub query. Say for example, let me code here select vendor ID, vendor name from vendors where VCT is equal to, or you can say right invoice total greater than whatever you can like. Okay, vendors table has not invoices. So, I can write select VID vnorm from vendors where VCT is equal to, or I have to choose another table. So, you give idea about invoices rather than, because I have to check the what are columns into it. So, let me show what are columns in invoices. Yes, there are queries. So, I can write select invoice ID, invoice total from invoices where VID in, and then I can write select statement here, select VID from vendors where VCT is equal to Ahmedabad. So what I have written in parenthesis is my subquery. This is my subquery, while this one is known as a main query, because I want to display invoice ID and invoice total from invoices, because in invoice table I have a VID column, right, and that VID I found in this Ahmedabad. So, if I run that query, it will show this 3 records. So, this is I use query inside a query, means subquery I have written. To give more idea, you can let me show one example. You can also write select invoice number, invoice date. So, here this query will help you to find out the invoice total which is greater than the average invoice total. Like here I code invoice number, invoice date, invoice total from invoices, where invoice total is greater than average of invoice total, and order by, because order by not used in subquery, but used with main query. So, if we apply it, it will display this 3 invoices having invoice total greater than the average of that one. Subquery can be used to code queries which work with 2 or more tables, and most subquery can be coded as a join, and most join can be coded as a subquery. Let us take one example that you whatever query you write with subquery, that most of them can be written with join also. Say for example, this is the query written with using subquery. Select invoice number, I date, invoice total from invoices where vendor ID in, and then you write select VID from vendors where state is Gujarat, and if you run this, then you will get all this record. Same way, if you want to apply with join, the same query you can write with join as a, you just need to type as a all the column from table name, and in your where clause you write V state is Gujarat, because the 2 tables are joined, invoices and vendors, and then you apply that, then the output will be same. So, most of query subquery can be rewrite as a join, and most of join can be rewrite as a subquery. Subquery can be written with in operator to provide a list of values which tested again expression, and subquery written using not in can be recorded using outer join. Subquery must return single column of values where the in operator is used. Say for example, how you can apply it. So, I just demonstrate it here. First we use with not in operator, like I want like to find out that what are the vendor which does not have any invoices generated. So, I write select VID, VName, VCT from vendors where VID not in invoices. So, that vendor does not have any invoices, and if I click with go button, so I only one record VID 9. Now, you can also write the same query using outer join. So, for that you can code VID, VName, VCT from vendors V left join invoices, and where I dot VID is null. So, that will be the output is same. So, that way you can apply with this one. Now, you can use various comparison operator in subquery. So, comparison operator can be used in where clause, and the general syntax is where expression, then comparison operator, and then you can use any of these keywords sum, any or all, and then subquery. Search condition without the sum, any or all keywords is a subquery must return a single value. Search condition with sum, any, all keywords, subquery can return a list of values, and all keyword is used to test that comparison condition is true for all the written value by subquery or not. If no rows are written by subquery, a comparison that uses all keyword is always true, and if all rows are written by subquery contains a null value, a comparison that uses all keyword is always false. This is the I demonstrate how all keyword can be used. Say for example, if any query like here x and then greater than all 1 comma 2. So, it will be treated as a that result will be x greater than 2. That means, x must be greater than all the values written by the subquery, which means it must be greater than maximum value. If x is greater than the maximum value written by subquery, it is evaluated as a true. Same way x less than all 1 comma 2. So, it will be minimum less than the minimum value, and then it will evaluate true. X is equal to all 1 comma 2, that means x is equal to 1 and x is equal to 2. X not equal to all 1 2 means x not in 1 and 2. Let me show you one example for all keyword. So, here I write we write a query using all keyword. Select vname, invoice number, invoice total from invoices, and vendors v, where I dot vid is v dot vid, and invoice total greater than all of. Select invoice total from invoices, where vid is 5. So, to give you idea, first internally it will be evaluate this query. Let me show you that query output of that one. So, it display invoice total from invoices, where vid is 5. So, value of this one is 15.50. So, that query will return all the value which is value greater than 15.50. I think all the records has a value greater than 15.50. Let me write greater than 100. So, this 3 records can be eliminated. So, the same query I just to give idea, I write here copy paste and vid 5 instead of 5. What should I write here? If I know where is a value less greater than this 100. So, I move to the invoices, and invoices value greater than 95 is for 8. So, here I can write vid is equal to 5. So, it will display all the record whose invoice total is greater than the vendor id 8 invoice total. So, now it will display this records are not included into it. So, this is how you can use all clause. There is a similar way you can use any keyword. So, any keyword is again used to test the comparison condition for true or false for one or more value written by subquery. If no rows are written by subquery or it written null, a comparison takes that any keyword is always false, and some keyword works as the same as any keyword. If you look at here x greater than any 1 comma 2, that means x greater than 1, minimum greater than minimum value of that one. X less than any 1 comma 2 means x less than 2, where x is your main query and then any, and then this 1 and 2 your result of subquery. X is equal to 1 comma 2 means x is equal to 1 or x is equal to 2. X not equal to 1 any 1 comma 2 means OR operator. Same way, let me show demonstration for any clause. So, I write that query that select vendor name and vendor, the same query we have written for all, but here I use any keyword and vendor id, let us say not 7, make 8 as we have done earlier. So, there will be this 3 record are display here. So, this is the very same way like all you can use any keyword. Now, all the query have written till they are known as a general subqueries, but there is a special type of subquery which is known as correlated subquery. So, correlated subquery is a subquery which executed once for each row of the main query, and a Correlated subquery refers to value which is provided by column in main query, and for each different value is written by main query for that column, the subquery returns a different result. A subquery which is executed only once for the entire row is known as a uncorrelated subquery. So, till we have take all the examples, these all are uncorrelated subquery. Let us take one example of correlated subquery. So, here the code is select VID I number I total from invoices I, where I total greater than select average I total from invoices I, where VID is equal to I dot VID, order by VID and I total. So, this subquery will return average of invoice total, but the outer query is a normal query where invoice total for each record. So, every time for single record invoice total will be compared with average of invoice total. So, this is the subquery. If you run it, it will display these 3 records, because the invoice total of these 3 are greater than the average of this one. So, this is a correlated subquery. Of course, it will be take more time to perform. So, it is advisable whenever only compulsory you should use correlated subquery. Then there is a one more operator known as the exist operator. It is used to test whether one or more are written by subquery or not, and not exist operator is used only for testing purpose. So, column name is not significant. So, generally it will be used select star statement when you use exist operator. The general syntax is where option you can use not exist, and then you can write subquery. Let me demonstrate one example of exist operator. Here we write select VID and then vname and vstat from vendors v, where not exists, select star from invoices I, where I dot VID is equal to v dot VID, means we would like to find a vendor details which is not available on invoices table. So, we know that there are one or two records, is only one record is there. So, that will display, but it will be check exist, that whether that record exists or not. Subquery can be used with other clauses also. For select we use where, we can use with where, but another way you can use with select as well as in having clause, from clause, and when a subquery used in the select clause, it is generally a correlated subquery, and subquery coded in select clause, the subquery must return a single value. A query which includes subquery in its select clause can be coding using a join instead of the subquery. Join is generally faster and easier to read than the compared to such type of subquery. Let us take one example of using subquery with select clause. So, that is a simple query I have written. Select vname comma, then another column name, instead you write select maximum I date from invoices, where VID is vendors dot VID, and this subquery, whole subquery is aliasing as a latest underscore INV from vendors and order by that particular column. If you click on go button, so it will display this record, and the same query can be written with join by writing joining this two value. Actually, you are using outer join, means you have to use either left or right join. Here I using left join right, vname maximum I date from vendors v left join I. So, it will display all the matching record as well as non matching record. So, the result will be same for both this value, you can check it. This is another way is which is can be coded in the from clause. Here we use with select as a column. Now, in the you can also use with from clause. When a coded in from clause, an alias must be assigned to subquery, and alias can be used as the same way as any table name. Subquery is coded in the from clause, alias should be used for any columns in the subquery that perform calculation, and this is also known as an inline view. So, inline view can use aliases as the column name of table. Let us take example for this one. Here I write this query, just show you demonstration of this one. Select V stat comma maximum sum of invoices as max sum invoice is a column alias. Then in from you write subquery, select V stat V name sum I total as sum of invoices from vendors V invoices I, where V dot VID is equal to I dot VID, group by V stat and V name, and alias is this subquery as a T and then group by V stat. So, if you run that, it will display this to stat and maximum sum of invoices. So, let us summarize today's session. We will start with scalar function and aggregate function. An aggregate function apply on set of values and return a one summary value. Most common aggregate functions are average, sum, mean, max and count. Then we discuss about group by and having clause, which is used when you want to group by on your query result, and having is applied to filter after you apply grouping the result. Finally, I come to point about subquery, that subquery is a query inside a query, and in subquery you can also use correlated subquery operator like any, all and exist operator, and subquery can be rewritten using join also. I hope you enjoy the session. These all are the references I have used for this presentation, and thank you for watching. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.